nau mai ki Environment and Climate Committee for today, Thursday, the 18th of June. Me karakia tātou. Manawa mai te mauri nuku, manawa mai te mauri rangi. He manawa nui, he manawa tahi, he manawa ora e. Ka whakamaua kia tīna, hui e, tā iki e. At the table here we have a number of councillors, 8 of us I think, and online we have Councillor Hunter, Wolf and Johnston. And Makareni, there she is. Very good. So that constitutes a quorum, doesn't it? Great. A good start. We have apologies from our Farming Reference Group Chair, Barbie Barton. So as a first item of business, do we have any other apologies, Lucas? No. So I move that apologies from Barbie be received. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you. And all those in favour? Thank you very much. This morning we have a big day actually for the committee. Just to give an overview, we have a committee meeting of about an hour and a half, hopefully. We have a workshop, which is reasonably short, but we'll squeeze it in. And then we're heading to Porirua Harbour for a field trip as a committee to see the places and the actions and the work going on to bring life to the Porirua Harbour Accord. So we will try and keep this meeting rolling. We have some great items on the agenda. We have 3 public participants to start with, and so I'd ask each to keep as close as possible, please, to the allocated 5 minutes. And councillors will just take 3 questions maximum on each public participant. If there are any questions you don't get to ask, but would like to follow up, I'm in contact with all the public participation persons, and we can follow up and get you answers down the track, just to keep time managed well. So first of all, we'd like to invite, have I missed anything? Conflicts of interest. Now there's always a long queue of those at Environment and Climate Committee. Does any member have a conflict of interest to declare? I don't see any, so moving on. Our first speakers are Joe Ledington, from Sanctuary to Sea Zealandia, supported by our officer Phil Barker from the catchment team. Phil, can I hand over to you to introduce and take it from there? Thank you very much.
Morena koutou councillors. Yes, I'm Phil Barker, Senior Catchment Advisor from the Tawhaniatara Catchment Team, and it's my privilege to be Greater Wellington's representative on the Collaborative Strategy Group for the Kia Mauri Ora Te Kaiwharawhara or Sanctuary to Sea collaboration, which for our part in the collaboration has been going for more than 8 years now in terms of the development of the approach, and which holds a clear 100-year vision and a 10-year strategic plan. And I think one unique feature of this is where some other catchment scale collaborations that Greater Wellington is a part of, we are kind of the anchoring organisation. In this case, Zealandia is the anchoring organisation. And so without further ado, I'll hand over to Joe and Mark.
Kia ora whu. Tēnā koutou katoa. E mihi ana ki ngā tōhua o nehe o te whanganui a tara e noho nei au. E mahi ana ahau ki te mara a tāne. He pou whakahaere te aki tai ao ahau. Ko Joe Ledington, tōku ingoa. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou.
Morena koutou, ko Mark Ormsby tōku ingoa. He uri ahau no Taranaki whānui, e mihi atu nei ki o koutou I tēnei wā. This time I'm the Interim General Manager of Engagement up at Zealandia, and also I whakapapatu Taranaki whānui. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Morena everyone, it's really great to be here. As I said, my name's Joe Ledington. I'm the General Manager for Conservation and Restoration at Zealandia Te Mare a Tāne. As most of you are hopefully aware, Zealandia is a small and nimble not-for-profit organisation with a mighty 500-year vision to restore the valley containing the headwaters of Te Kaiwharawhara, and in doing so to transform how people live with nature. We do this with 25-year generational strategies. Next slide, please. Can I do slides? Oh, thank you.
It has a slight delay, so if it's working, then there it goes. It's changed.
Wait, that's good. Living with nature is Zealandia's second generational strategy and is focused on what we can achieve when we work together to transform communities and nature. The North Island Kaka shows us what is possible when we collaborate across boundaries. Prior to 2000, North Island kaka were extinct from Wellington and classified nationally as endangered. Between 2002 and 2007, kaka were released in Zealandia and a few started exploring their new urban environment. In 2010, kaka were recorded breeding outside of the sanctuary thanks to the predator control work being done by Greater Wellington, Wellington City Council and community groups. Also around this time, their national threat status was downgraded from endangered to recovery, in part due to the work being done across Wellington. And now you're sure to find a child in Wellington who finds the sight of a kaka screeching overhead to be of any interest at all. But for those of us who are a little older, we know how special and unique this site is, particularly in an urban environment. As we witnessed these manu flying over the fence, Zealandia started to think more about the impact we could have across the wider Wellington landscape. Being based at the headwaters of Te Kaiwharawhara, it made sense to start in this locally significant catchment. In 2017, in partnership with Taranaki Whānui, Ke Mauri Ora Te Kaiwharawhara, or Sanctuary to Sea, was born with a 100-year vision to restore the Mauri of Te Kaiwharawhara. Our shared vision is that in 100 years, the catchment is a healthy, freshwater and forested ecosystem in an urban setting, which sustains an abundant nature-rich biodiversity and enhances opportunities for Wellingtonians to have a nature-rich future. This vision is portrayed by our mana whenua partners as Te Kuia o Te Kaiwharawhara. It helps us to share the vision of what restoring Mauri of a catchment is when we think about her as a person. Her head represents the headwaters in Zealandia and her feet the estuary that flows into Wellington Harbour. It reminds us to reflect on how we might treat our grandmother. Can she breathe? Is her body healthy? Do we visit her and watch and listen for what she is telling us? How legal personhood for Te Kaiwharawhara can be achieved is currently being explored by mana whenua with our partners at the Law Department at Te Herenga Waka, Victoria University. So what does a 100-year vision look like operationally? For us, it takes a community to achieve such an ambitious long-term vision, and we do this with our strategy group. All of our partners on this group, including Greater Wellington, work together to develop a 10-year strategy that outlines key goals, and we each work within our organisations to progress the shared strategy and aligned action plan. In 2025, the strategy group drove a major change to the structure of this collaboration, with 3 working groups created under the strategy group. These groups enable more people, more groups, and more organisations to get involved in a structured way and ensure strategically important work can be delivered. All groups have mana whenua representation, and their current areas of focus are driven by advice from the strategy group and quarterly community hui. We've found that collaborations at all levels of a project make for complicated and busy slide decks. Yet, it continues to inspire me how many people care about and take action to support Te Kaiwharawhara at all levels across the community, from waste management businesses to childcare centres. People want to be involved and are looking for advice on how to do so. I've got a few recent examples of outstanding achievements where we've seen tangible outcomes for the whaitua. These include translocation of kākahi in toitoi, or common bully, which helps achieve a medium-term outcome in Te Mahiri Wai o Te Kāhui Taio, the mana whenua whaitua implementation plan for Greater Wellington. These translocations were done in partnership with Greater Wellington's Ropotiaki and have secured another population of these culturally and ecologically important species within the rohe. These translocations are nationally leading in how they were carried out, with mātauranga, conservation and biosecurity at the forefront. Toitoi, or common bully, are now present outside the sanctuary, having survived their first obstacle getting through the buried landfill at Appleton Park. We're now well into planning a 10-year freshwater program of work alongside mana whenua to achieve outcomes in Te Mahere Wai that include returning more culturally significant species to the headwaters of Te Kaiwharawhara. We connect communities to this awa of significance and aim to create resilient and thriving environment for the species that call this whaitua home. This project featured here is located at the awa mouth near Spotlight in what many consider to be a neglected area, but in fact holds ecological value. 29 organisations came together and used broken shopping trolleys to provide additional spawning habitat for a nationally vulnerable species in a heavily channelized urban stream, showing what we can do with $400 when we're all working together with shared outcomes and vision. We're so grateful to have excellent support from the catchment planning teams and advisors at Greater Wellington who facilitate greater coordination across the council, putting us in touch with people and teams who can assist in achieving our vision. Please talk about us and the work we do together, and think about us when you see opportunities to collaborate further. We have an engaged community and network who are already mobilised and ready to collaborate to bring strategies and wild ideas to life. And finally, when you are making decisions for Te Kaiwharawhara, think of this kuia and how she will be impacted. What can you do to make her healthier? What can you do to make her stronger? What can you do to make her more resilient for the future she will endure long after we have all passed on? Roading, stormwater, wastewater, earthworks, and housing density decisions all impact her, and every single one of us has a chance and a place to make positive choices now for her future. Thank you so much for your time. Ngā mihi nui.
Thank you very much, Joe and Mark. We have a question from Councillor Free.
Yes, so somebody actually raised with me during the campaign about the access to the stream. In your opinion, could more be done to facilitate people actually being able to walk along the stream or get to the stream?
Yeah, there's definitely areas of the stream, and the one that springs to mind the most is actually the estuary, which, I don't know if you want to say more to, but I know it's culturally significant that having access to the estuary mouth and having access to that would mean a lot to our community.
Okay. Maybe I can talk more offline about what might be able to be done.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Yeah.
Thank you. You mentioned the wastewater and stormwater as key impactors on Kaiwharawhara. Does your group have interactions with Wellington Water and Te Aki Wai to come to meld together, I guess, your vision for the stream and the practical realities and investment priorities for that wastewater and stormwater catchment?
Yes, absolutely. Wellington Water were initially on the strategy group and have moved away from that. I would very much like to see Te Aki Wai back on the strategy group. And it's a huge issue for the awa. Yeah.
Thank you. Last question from Councillor Saw.
Thank you so much. It's definitely a project that I've learned a lot about in the last term. I was just wanting to know whether a lot of this work came out of the IREX projects. I think there's a lot of work done there. There's a lot of some of the aspirations and material that you're using in the relationships still sort of flowing on from that, pardon that particular pun. And just to pick up Councillor Duthie's question on, one of the most severe impacts is the stormwater and wastewater network. And the price only goes up and up and up. And I think it was in the hundreds of millions around the Whaitua time. What do you see as some of the commitments from other agencies, and how do we actually solve some of those problems? I mean, obviously having groups like that help, but yeah, where are we going to fund the money?
Yeah, very good questions. So We were heavily involved with IREX, and some projects would have been involved in IREX, and that shopping trolley one is actually an example where IREX didn't happen, and so we just went ahead. We've got a lot of plans for that estuary area that could improve ecological value, and so we just want to chip away at them now. And yeah, your second question, it's so difficult because we had a major win recently with the Otare wastewater leak. 5 million is gone from WCC long-term plan to fix that. And yet at our last community hui a few months ago, or a month or so ago, the feedback is that's going to move the problem down into an area of Trillissic Park, and so we're going to have to start this process all over again.
So could you just give us a little update on that trunk sewer project? Because I believe it was in the LTP, and they were supposed to begin work now.
Yep. So they're in there. So they are beginning work. They're in their tendering and contractor phase. And they've got a preferred design. They've costed it out at about $5 million. But the issue is that the pipes are the wrong size, and that goes all the way down the catchment. So by fixing it there, they're going to move the issue down to Trillissic Park, and which is of huge concern to our community. And so there's no plan in place for that, and we will probably start back into that loop of raising concerns. And
thank you so much for that. It's really good to understand it.
And if I could just add about, I'll talk to access as well. There's not only physical access, but access in terms of curiosity. And so we kind of believe if we get people just down to the awa and looking at the state of the awa, whatever, however that looks, I think you're going to get more access that way. And so one way to spread the news about that there is a river here is through the post, through the kuia. So we've got some posters here for all the councillors here. I'm going to leave this with Phil Barker to hand out, but you saw the picture up there. And so when people see this poster, they get curious and they go, who is she? What is she? And so that's what we want to also develop too. And that's been run through our storytelling workshop group. We've got the technical community and storytelling workshop. So yeah, we want to spread the news that the kai wharawhara is here, the kuia is here.
Kia ora korua. Wonderful words to end with there. Thank you very much. And I'm sure if councillors would like to go on a little field trip or a site visit, then
to do a site visit on the weekend, actually.
So appreciate your time and telling us about the project and progress. Next we have Dr. Tim Booth from Taumata Hauha, speaking about funding sustainable land use, and I believe there's a presentation coming up. Welcome, Tim. 5 minutes, and then we'll take a few questions, and the floor's yours.
Cool. Yeah, kia ora koutou. Kia ora Nicola. I don't recognise any other faces here, but I'm Tim Booth, currently working for a company called Taumata Hauha. I wanted to speak with you today about what we offer, because I think we have a lot to offer the Greater Wellington region, both ratepayers and the council and potentially council land holdings. My background is in nature conservation, so when I hear people talk about Zealandia, I'm taken back to my time as a volunteer working at Bushy Park, Tarapuruhi, just outside Wanganui, which is another jewel in the crown of New Zealand's nature conservation efforts. But the crown has the jewel. What else? What else is the landscape looking like? And that's when we start to talk about the cloak. And we've heard a lot about recloaking Papatūānuku. At the moment, it's from my line of sight, it's a bit of a shabby-looking patchwork of very noble attempts to reforest and restore degraded landscapes, but there is so much work to do, and we can't currently rely on volunteer efforts and goodwill alone. We have to leverage the capital that is out there that's willing to come on board and make this happen. So that means a couple of things. It means, I have to use a dirty word here when it comes to nature conservation, compromise, and also it means setting aside notions of ecological purity, which is always been a barrier to large-scale nature conservation efforts. And that's where I come in and talk about the ETS, the New Zealand Emissions Trading Scheme, and how that can be leveraged to create the kind of longer-term ecological restoration outcomes that we all want. There's lots of scary statistics out there about land use change over time in New Zealand. One that caught my eye recently was a UN statistics that stated 824,000 hectares of New Zealand's land is officially degraded by their standards. I've got this photo here, which will look familiar to anyone who's spent time in, most of New Zealand's regions. Now, there's a bit of a trick to this, though. We look at a landscape covered in gorse and we think, oh goodness, what's happened? The landscape's been neglected. First of all, we've cleared it of all this wonderful biodiversity that was there. And now it's been left to go to wreck and ruin, and all we're left with is the Scottish weed. Now, to be fair to gorse, and many of you will know the actual ecological uses for gorse and restoration, it provides a fantastic nurse crop for native restoration. We don't use gorse exclusively as a company to run our projects, although if it's there, we try and maximise its use by cutting rows through it and planting through it. So it becomes a nursery crop for native and exotic species. But what I wanted to use this as a segue for was to talk about other exotic species that can be used as a viable nurse crop and also create economic revenue. So we work with a range of exotic and native species in our company. The photo that you see in the background here is a demonstration of what a mixed exotic and native forest can actually look like. This is a mixture of native species, shrubs and trees, as well as eucalypt species.
1 minute.
One more minute. Okay, thanks. And these are the kind of forests that we have started planting and developing around New Zealand. Currently, we've planted around 4,000 hectares of mixed species forest. The kind of whakaaro or philosophy that we've used to underpin this is an idea we've called Tāne's Marae. We have 3 participants, 3 species, varieties of species, the rangatira, which are the longer-lived exotics, the taonga species, which are smaller shrubs and flaxes, which bring biodiversity, and then the manuhiri species, which are the exotics, which are the major carbon sequesters, and these become the main revenue source in the early years of the project. This is just a graph showing the kind of process of carbon sequestration. You can see more about that on our website, as well as the processes that we follow in conducting our projects. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tim. Have you met with officers and talked about Greater Wellington activities and your company's work and how the two might interrelate?
Yes, I've had meetings with Kelly Brenner. We've had some pretty productive early conversations around potential restoration work on Belmont Park. I'm also very aware of the Golan Valley acquisition and the potential there for restoration. So these are the things that we're considering in the short term about potentially collaborating with the regional council.
Thank you. Any questions from members? There are none. So we can follow up after this meeting, and but appreciate you coming in and telling us the story and offering, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next speaker in public participation is Councillor Rachel Clark from South Wairarapa District Council and her councillor colleague Rupert Watson, who have come over the hill to visit us today with a particular interest in air quality. So welcome, Rachel and Rupert.
Kia ora koutou, ko Rachel Clark tōku ingoa, and Councillor Rupert Watson with me here. We are South Wairarapa District Councillors, and I'm the Chair, and Rupert is a member for the Environmental Sustainability Committee. Thank you for the invitation to attend and for the work of officers in putting the report together, and the opportunity to put some comments and questions to the committee regards the paper that has been tabled for today on air quality. It's a great initiative to have these State of the Region's Environment Health reports and to understand the direct impacts from the state of the environment on human health. The figures are alarming, are they not, for early deaths caused by air pollution, 3,000 each year nationally, and particularly, and having worked in health as a nurse, the impact on infants and children with respiratory illness and the social cost of approximately 1.29 billion annually. It's astounding. As per your purpose point 2, it is that critical regard for human health underpins decision-making, prioritisation and resource allocation to environmental management. The report highlights the need to understand the demographics of those likely to be impacted by poor air quality, those in poorer quality housing, those with pre-existing medical conditions, young, old, etc., and the clear correlation required towards improving health and social housing outcomes. In this instance, it's clear that data is necessary to inform policy, education and resourcing. I would suggest that in the Wairarapa, more air monitoring stations are established to provide adequate data across the region. I note there are stations in West Masterton and Carterton with no monitoring in the South Wairarapa, where wood burner use is actually high and there is a lower socio-economic demographic band in Featherston. I noted that based on experience and evidence from elsewhere in New Zealand, regulation combined with financial incentives to replace wood burners with clean heating options is the most effective approach, as opposed to behaviour change alone. My question: what incentives are currently available or can be introduced for the public and or landlords to install heat pumps and insulation rather than using wood fires? What are the established limits for clean air burning wood fires? I know this started quite some time ago, and the impact on air quality. Page 2 of the report notes that Greater Wellington does not currently regulate emissions from wood burners. My question: is there an intention from Greater Wellington to regulate emissions as a way to make meaningful impact on air quality? What measures have other regional councils put into place? For example, banning burn-offs on bonfires and outdoor burning during the winter months. Is it feasible to implement this in the Wairarapa, possibly with some outrage from farmers, to manage winter air quality levels? Alongside this is the question of the role of councils, district councils, in using bylaws to control outdoor illegal burning. My understanding is that it's under your realm of activity. Are there any district councils using bylaws to this purpose in New Zealand, and is this effective? What education programs and or resources / incentivisation are there to educate the public on air quality issues, though noted from your report that this does have a low impact on behaviour change? How do we activate more fully the reporting pathways and compliance in Wairarapa for air quality? For example, on the illegal burning of plastics or toxic materials. Is there room to have a local officer response more immediately as opposed to someone having to come over the hill? And I know you're addressing this in your report when you come to us, Chair. You note in your report slow gains and that policy settings are outdated. I look forward to recommendations on positive actions to effect change and to speed the pace of improvements in air quality. Thank you for the opportunity to raise these questions pertinent to the air quality report being spoken to later in the meeting. Ngā mihi.
Thank you, councillors. We love nothing more than receiving a challenge, and I really appreciate you coming over and putting those questions. Clearly, we won't be able to answer them all today, but you've also emailed them through to me, so we'll make sure we do get some responses from officers and build that into our thinking. So we'll just take some questions for you from committee members, and and then we'll have a more discussion about the equality report when we get to that item on the agenda. Councillor Saw.
Cool. Thank you. It's lovely to see our colleagues from over the hill and old friends too. Rach, it's nice to see you again. I guess with your background in health and in the community, and now in your role in sort of governance, really interested to know how well the community understands some of the impacts of air quality. I have a sort of sneaking suspicion that a lot of people assume that we live in the Wellington region and so we've got this wind that just flushes everything through. But what have you seen in the community in terms of, I guess, the negative health outcomes people have and their understanding of how that correlates to the air quality?
I suspect it comes down to data. I think it's probably low. I have to admit, when I moved to the Wairarapa, there was a report on poor air quality due to inversion, and I was actually shocked by that myself, because you just kind of think wind, don't you, in Wellington? So I think that's possibly what people generally think, and I think for members of the public, they don't always make those connections between burning, as Quentin's news article, burning poor quality woods, woods that are made, not real wood, wet wood, and that the particulates that are coming out of those are damaging for human health.
So with your background in health, do you think that, primary health providers also make that link? Because, you have your children presenting with a respiratory illness, or you have people who just have this, COPD. Do you think that at primary health level, they're able, people are able to go, this is the cause, part of the cause of why you keep getting sick?
I think so, but I think probably what this report highlights is the need for further collaboration, as I said, against health, against social housing, and the outcomes from those, and the Healthy Homes Initiative was a start, but it doesn't address all of the areas of poor housing which are really injurious to, small children particularly.
Yeah, I think it's been recognised in the Masterton area more than our area, but we have a lot more still days. I think that there's an element of climate change that we're just coming to grips with. The home firewood industries, is a major employer in Featherston. It's like, so I think this is going to be quite a new thing for people to get to grips with in that part of the territory.
Thank you. Councillor Connolly, question.
Thanks, team, and thanks for coming over the hill and talking to us today. So I don't pretend to be an expert on air quality, but I have worked in spaces adjacent to this, and I'm really aware that air quality has been a massive issue for the Canterbury region, mostly again due to their geography, but also their climate, meaning lots of wood burning. And so they have taken a much more aggressive regulatory approach on wood burners, including, prohibiting the installation of new wood burners in new dwellings and requiring at various points in construction or development or subdivision new existing wood burners to be taken out and replaced with cleaner solutions. And also even, going around monitoring, like physically having staff looking at emissions from fires and knocking on people's doors and saying, "Oi, what's going on with your fireplace?" Those seem quite, as I say, an aggressive intervention. And only warranted in Canterbury by the fact that they had quite serious problems with the number of days that were reporting problems.
A question, Councillor.
If we were to go with something like that, do you think that your community would actually support it?
No.
A succinct answer to a complicated question.
I think it's, how you steer towards that. I mean, I did grow up in Canterbury, at the time that you were talking about, and it would be really interesting to see their data over their aggressive / draconian approach. But, Wairarapa is a rural community. It's a community, with quite a big proportion of, lower socioeconomic groupings in Featherston and Masterton, and people rely on that firewood that they can sometimes access cheaply and freely, so they see it's been a free source of power. Not everybody, obviously, some people buy it. So it's like, how do you step out and approach that manages all of that respectfully without being aggressive?
Thank you. Councillor Elder, last question.
I guess mine's a continuation of Councillor Conley's question, perhaps a little bit more pragmatic. What economic considerations have you given to the measures, to the issues you're addressing, given that people use firewood because it's way cheaper than electricity, and that current farming practices are something that farmers do because they're affordable and manageable? If you want to implement change, how do you propose to incentivise people?
Well, that's a good question, and that's my question to the officers. I don't have the skills to answer that question, but it is certainly, as I said in addressing that question, how do you step it out? How do you do it bearing in mind the context that you've raised about us being in a rural community, about people using firewood, about the financial impacts on low-income families, you know, who just want to keep using that fire, you know. How do you manage all of that carefully towards change?
Thank you. And it's clear from this conversation that there are these multiple dimensions to it, and it's not a simple black and white issue. So I, as Chair, will commit to get back to you on your questions with the information we do have, and make sure we share that with the committee members. But I guess to say that the purpose of an air quality report like the one on our agenda today is to prompt exactly these questions. It might be that there aren't the resources, or it's not the highest priority in the scheme of things, but it is to prompt those questions and make sure we're making informed decisions and investment choices. So thank you very much for your time in coming over.
You're welcome. Thank you all.
Okay, that brings us to the end of public participation. And I'll find my paperwork. We now need to move to confirm the public minutes of this committee on the 7th of May 2026. So are there any questions about those minutes? I don't see any. Does anyone? Councillor James is going to move that they're a true and correct record, or whatever we do. And Councillor Saw's winking at me for a second. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Anyone in disagreement? Of course not. Very good. Oh, look, some people have popped up on the screen. We have 4 lovely faces on the screen, so that's wonderful to see you all. It means that the one person isn't quite so big when you're all there, so that's great. And here comes, it's Claire as well. 5 on the screen. Very good. Moving on to our agenda item 5, which is the update on progress and action items from previous committee meetings. Now, there's always a couple of questions about these from members, so members, just take a moment to glance through them, because they will be your requests from the past. Is there anything that you're feeling could be further explained or elaborated on, Councillor Saw? This is action items. Well, I'm not seeing any, but if there are any during the meeting or later, please just follow up with me as the chair, and I will follow those with officers. So that's just information, isn't it? No, nothing to be done there. So moving on to our next and first substantial item on the agenda is our Environmental Insights Reporting new report on air quality in the Wellington region. I invite officers to join us. Director of Knowledge and Insights, Dave Hopkins, can start us off and introduce your colleagues. And over to you, Dave.
Thank you. We will try to get through this because I appreciate it's a busy day. 2 things I wanted to say really quickly is this is the first in a series. There are 2 sessions today. This first session is on the air quality report itself, so very looking forward to answering questions you may have on that. We do have a session later this afternoon around improvements you would like to see to future reports, what kind of content, the phasing, things like that. So if you could hold those kind of what you prefer to see or future improvements till the afternoon session, just to help with the speed. We're happy to take them now, but it might be just help the chair out if we put those forward. Air quality report, it's a very large team of 3 people that covers the entire region. I would like to say that. So Tamsin's here, we've got Jeremy's in the background, and Darren's keeping the lights on, I'm assuming. So with that, I will hand over to the team to undertake the presentation.
Yeah, kia ora koutou. Thanks so much for the opportunity to raise the profile of air. I'm really excited about that. I'm Tamsin Mitchell, Air Quality Scientist, and I'll take the report as read. This is just a quick sort of whip through some of the key points. I'll try not to get into too much detail because I know we've got time constraints. So in our region and throughout the country, the main issue with air quality is combustion from human-generated sources. It's burning of fossil fuels, of wood,
And the two main culprits are motor vehicles and home heating. So starting with motor vehicles, we've got elevated levels, of course, close to the source, close to busy roads, and in areas where the dispersion of these emissions is restricted. For example, what we call street canyons. And that's when you've got tall buildings on either side, and it's particularly bad where you've got high emitting diesel vehicles, such as buses or heavy trucks. So that's the first issue. Second issue, we've got home heating, and this is combustion as well. Home heating, fine particles in the wood smoke, damaging to health. And this is really driven by your wood burner density and also the combination of the valley areas plus weather conditions that restrict the dispersion of emissions. So same thing, environmental confinement, it's just this is caused by the weather in the landscape. And this is mainly restricted in our region to sort of Wairarapa towns are the main issues in these areas. So onto the social costs, pretty eye-watering. The national cost is about 15.5 billion, so we're a bit lower than that, of course. So the social costs are the direct costs, medical costs, loss of productivity, days off work, that kind of thing. And in our region, similar to some other places in the country, we've got about 2/3 of the impacts are due to motor vehicles and 1/3 from home heating. Just waiting for the next slide to come up. So looking at the trends in these two sources, the good news is that motor vehicle traffic-related air pollution has been declining over the long term. And this is mainly due to modernisation of the vehicle fleet. As new cars come into the country, they're manufactured to meet higher, more stricter emission standards. So gradually the fleet is cleaning. And we've got roadside sites, which is mainly the emissions of the fleet, and then the background sites are where people live. So we've got quite a large monitoring network we've set up, and because monitoring is very expensive, we've got a new method of using these little tubes. We've got about 30 of them around our region. So we're pretty much got covered. We've got Kapiti, we've got Porirua, Waimanumatu, we've got a lot of coverage there. So we want to get a representative picture because NO2 is very variable across the region. You can have concentrations in one street which are different just a few metres down the road. So having a good coverage means we can be confident in our trends, which are actually plateauing at the moment. Another example of where you've got an intervention on the Golden Mile, which has quite bad air quality due to the diesel buses. We've actually made very good inroads here. We've got monitoring on Manor Street, which is just buses only, and we've seen that with the replacement of diesel buses with electric buses, our levels of diesel particulate and NO2 have plummeted dramatically. They're still starting to go up now a little bit in the last couple of years, and that's because we've had to put more diesel buses onto these routes because of increased passenger demand. So, but still, overall, good news story. Then, as a bit of interest, we've been looking at exposure for people who actually travel through our road corridors. So whether you're on a bus, whether you're driving, whether you're walking or cycling, you'll get most of your daily dose of traffic-related air pollution on our road corridors. So we've got Darren, who's one of our monitoring officers, who's a keen cyclist. He bikes into Cuba Street from the hut, and he started wearing a little device which measures the amount of diesel particulate he's exposed to. And so this just shows along State Highway 1 that he's obviously getting some hot spots, and also at Melling. And we're going to repeat this experiment moving on to the new wonderful bike path that's just opened to sort of demonstrate the fact that just moving a little bit away from the road can have big impacts on your exposure. But that said, we want to stress that even if you're in traffic being exposed to air pollution, health benefits of cycling in a country like New Zealand still outweigh those negative benefits. So we don't want to discourage people from cycling. Moving into Masterton, which is probably pretty representative of most Wairarapa towns. We've got the fine particles from wood smoke. This is our winter averages, and you can see that we're bouncing around a little bit, but generally going down, bouncing around because of different weather conditions.
And we are noticing the winters are becoming shorter and they're becoming a little bit warmer and windier. So we're getting some assistance in reducing air pollution due to the weather, and also a little bit more pivoting towards heat pumps, especially across our region. But we've still got about a third to half of all winter days we're not meeting the daily guidelines for the World Health Organization. So regulatory outlook, things are really, really uncertain at the moment, so I'm not going to say too much here. It's just that I just want to make the point that we've got an existing standard for PM10, which is a couple of decades out of date now, hasn't kept up with the science and the health research. So we're quite keen with the RMA reforms. We're looking forward to getting new environmental limits, but we don't know what those are going to be and where they're going to be set. But still, the focus is still going to be on these combustion sources because that's where the health impacts are. And also we want to recognise that even if we do full electrification, we're still going to get harmful emissions from transport due to the fine particles that come from brake, tyre and road wear. Just want to quickly, before my last slide, just say big shout out, thank you to our two monitoring officers who provide the data for this work. And what could our councillors advocate for? It's fairly straightforward. It's continuing with our LTP direction of electrification, public transport, supporting active travel, and aligning with the climate goals, because what comes out of the tailpipe, we're trying to reduce CO2 that's co-emitted with harmful emissions. So we've got some benefits for air quality, but they're not often explicitly linked together because there are trade-offs and benefits. And as the home heating issue, very clear that you have to have, a lot of carrot. You can't just have stick, and you can't just have education. And it's a holistic approach. It's the whole heating. We shouldn't just be focusing on what's coming out the chimney. And also, I'd like to continue to be providing the equality monitoring data.
Thank you very much, team. Very timely as we go into a new LTP cycle and think about relative priorities. So this report and then subsequent ones are going to assist councillors in understanding the end use or end environmental outcomes of how things are and how we intervene on those. So let's see what questions are around the table. I think I saw Councillor Connolly first, followed by Councillor James.
If the chair will indulge me, I just wanted to thank you guys for this report because it was really, really well written and really easy to follow and just an enjoyable paper. It's right up there with the gravel extraction paper for best papers of the year. Maybe we should have a competition.
Was it the pictures?
So yeah, no, really, really good. And I even sent excerpts to my girlfriends just to shock them into some, the figures around the cost and the premature deaths are quite astonishing, aren't they? Questions. You mentioned in the report, though it's not the main content of your report, that most of the complaints about air quality are around odour. So I'm wondering if there is any... I understand that monitoring odour is quite difficult because there aren't really standards that you can apply to determine how bad, and other than objective, subjective measures, you can't really determine how bad odour is. And then I'm also wondering if there's any, that people are probably complaining about odour because it's something that is really like in their face or in their nose. But they're maybe not aware of the air quality issues because they're not as detectable, and that maybe we should be doing more like on our Greater Wellington home screen during winter to allow people to access air quality monitoring data so that they have awareness of some of these trouble spots.
That was a question.
Is there a question?
Two questions. How do we monitor odour and what metrics do we use? And two, should we be doing more to promote our issues around air quality, particularly in winter, so that people are aware and try to take action accordingly?
Thank you.
Okay, I'll probably separate those two issues out to an odour question, which is for our environmental regulation colleagues, and the second question about the displaying of the monitoring data. Do you want to start with the...
Yeah, kia ora koutou, through the chair. So in terms of
Odour itself, we don't monitor odour, we respond to odour complaints is probably where we're at the moment. So it's probably one of our biggest call outs as well through the hotline. So that you alluded to the fact it's a subjective measure to odour. What the test is an O&O test, objectionable or offensive odours beyond the boundary. And that's, like I said, it's a subjective call, but our officers are trained to measure that. So they've even gone on courses in the past to measure their nasal strengths and things like that. Anyway, it's very, very technical, but it's a test beyond the boundary. We do what's called a 360 test, and that's how we measure the odour, but we don't actually monitor odour as such. It's just a reactive response to odour complaints.
Just that does make it hard to, when we've got ongoing problems like Seaview, to see improvement, for example, if it's, and anything we can do in that space to allow better information around some of those problem sites would be really useful.
Thank you. And a response to the question around could we be providing more monitoring information publicly?
Yeah, I agree with you entirely. Currently, we are using LAWA to put our monitoring data through to, but I'll let Megan agree.
Only to add that all of our environmental monitoring or information and how we report on it is currently under review in terms of how we do better place-based reporting of environmental information. So watch this space.
Thank you. Next question is from Councillor James.
Thank you. I also enjoyed the paper, maybe not as much as my colleague, but still, it's good. Two quick questions. One, sort of the takeaway that I got from it in terms of the actions that we control as Greater Wellington, in terms of getting the most bang for our buck for improving air quality, is probably accelerating the transition to EV buses. Is that correct?
That would improve sort of local air quality in certain areas, but as a region wide, it's actually the whole vehicle fleet, which we don't actually control.
Which leads me to my second question, which is in terms of the advocacy that we do as a council to central government in terms of getting the most bang for our buck. It seems like promoting improvements to the clean car standard in particular would get us the most bang for buck.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, a lot of this stuff is led by central government in the emissions space.
Okay, thank you.
I have a supplementary to Councillor James' question. Currently, there's a proposal to add a second bus spine along the Harbour Quays to take some pressure off the Golden Mile. From an air quality perspective, would reducing the number of buses on the Golden Mile and putting them on a nearby but different sort of route that's perhaps more exposed to the harbour, less canyon effect, might that have a measurable impact on air quality in Wellington Central CBD?
Yes, I'd hope so, and I've preemptively put a monitoring tube on the Harbour Quays so we could track some progress if there was a change there. But yes, it is more exposed there, so I would expect it to be better.
Thank you, and good proactive thinking to get some monitoring in advance. Always good to have a baseline. Councillor Johnstone online is the next question.
Thank you. Related, possibly because they're both from Tawa, so I've got two questions. One is, can we be better at, I guess, communicating with the public about likely issues? So obviously Spicer landfill comes up quite a lot from the smell perspective, as indicated, and there must be certain conditions that make it a heck of a lot worse. Is there a way that we can get more information out? And the second one was there was a recent fire. It was lit to get rid of slash, and there were an awful lot of again social media complaints. Only 3 actually, from what I can understand, went to the 0800 number. But the difficulty that I understand that the officers had in that case was when they went out to have a look, the weather was quite good, so the smoke wasn't bad. But when people were complaining, the wind was actually blowing all the smoke back into certain areas, and people were reporting breathing problems and goodness knows what else. So I guess I've got 2 questions around that particular incident. Is there a way that we could actually warn people if this sort of thing is happening? Or can we put any provisions in that say to the landowner, you need to let people know? I understand it was within his consent provisions, and I've got no grizzle about why he was doing it. I think it's really necessary. But it did actually cause the community quite a lot of angst for about 5 days, which was quite a long time. And the officers were great at reporting. I'm just trying to think, is there a better way we can manage this sort of incident that really did have quite widespread impact.
Oh, that sounds horrible. I'll just pass you on to our regulatory colleagues for that.
Thank you.
Kia ora. Me again. So the tower incident in particular, it's just, that one sort of highlights that we, through our 0800 number, we do require people to notify us quickly. If they don't, we can only get out when they've notified us. So in that case, I think people were quick to go to social media, but not so quick to come to us. So that was we can only go out as fast as we get the notifications. So in terms of, we didn't know it was happening either, so we can't warn people if we don't know it's happening. So it was just another way of trying to dispose of slash in that case, and the owner thought, "Oh, I'll burn it," and the conditions were right for burning. When we went out and when we got the calls, it was right for burning. There wasn't any objectionable smoke beyond the boundaries. So, but I take your point that it may have been earlier on, but of course we weren't notified earlier on, so we couldn't assess it against those conditions earlier. So, all I would just reiterate to councillors: if you do get social media complaints, put them onto the 0800 number straight away, and we will respond as soon as we can.
Yes, so we did that, as you know, but I think it's the moment in time. You know, like you can go out there for, I don't know whether you went out for an hour or whatever, but it wasn't long before they were grizzling again, and it was a long-term thing. You could see there was a problem. You could see there were photos, and I'm not blaming you guys or anything like that, but I just wonder if in the consent process that we have to build in a notification. Is there a way? It's an operational decision before I get told off by the chair, but it actually has a community impact. And I just think we needed to be there longer, or we should have done some more spot checks. Something needed to happen because it really did cause us some reputational damage.
Thank you, Councillor. I
Yeah.
won't tell you off. I'll offer you a carrot instead, in that we can talk about this offline and see if we can do something after the meeting to further that for you. The next question is Councillor Saw.
Hello, thank you. I just want to reiterate some of the comments around this report. It was such a delight to read. I too screenshotted some bits and sent it around some of my, groups of nerds, which is more of a, and it took my eye off the football. So that's also quite a major feat. Couple of questions, and in a slightly different direction. It was about, the implications for Māori. Calm down, Councillor Elder, you just hear me out on this one. So we, paragraph 15 talks about some of the hospitalisation rates and respiratory outcomes. There's already Te Whatu data that shows in our region the impact, the disparity of avoidable deaths and respiratory illnesses such as lung cancer, COPD, asthma, and so forth. In future reports, are we able to sort of put those two things together? Because we know about the social impact, we also know about the cost of it, and I think there's data that we can either go to our other agencies with, where this supports some of those findings, or just demonstrates the impact of this sort of data. Because some of the numbers are really stark in terms of the disparity, but also the consequence of avoidable deaths and the years of life that are reduced off people. So with, I guess in that paragraph, there could be a little bit more fleshed out on that. And to follow up my other point during public participation, and maybe this is for the workshop piece, how do we see socialising some of this information? For example, Councillor James asked about the Golden Mile impacts. It's not lost on me that today our Wellington City Council colleagues are debating whether to continue with Golden Mile. Do they see this sort of information in their decision making, that those investments actually have a very, very direct health impact on our community?
Thank you, Councillor. Let's hold that second question for the workshop. You're quite right. That's a good place to discuss that. And just to complement your first question, I also appreciated the implications for Māori section. It was very, very well written, and I think there's a learning there for the next iteration, or maybe when we pull the different state of the environment domains and places together into a synthesis, maybe near the end of the triennium, to build some of those connections between that public health information and demographic disparity.
And democratic decision making too.
Yeah.
Cool.
But did you have a comment on Councillor?
Yeah, thank you. Amazing question. It's always quite difficult. We don't have the expertise in the public health, but in any public health research, we always consider impacts on Māori and
everyone too.
Everyone, but they're always that's a thing, which is how it should be. But in terms of this report, this is based on a national model, HAPPENS, which is actually all the data is available down to CAU, and you can. They did a report.
Is that a census?
Sorry, census area unit. Yeah, I think it's called statistical area 2 now. And there was a report that came off the social equity report. They did some more report to look at ethnic disparities, but it didn't. At a national population level, it didn't come out as. It was mainly Pacifica people that were worse affected, and that was due to the high proportion of population in Auckland that live near busy roads. So statistically, it's quite difficult to tease that out on a small sample size like our region. So that's something that would require additional resource and expertise, probably outside our council.
We can go offline. I can talk to you about that.
Sorry, it goes on and on and on.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I'm sorry. I did have a specific, didn't do stats at high school, so it's probably going to show now. I had a question around. Sorry, my diligence not working properly. Oh yeah, it was on page 29 of Diligent where it says recognise the problem, and it was about the regional spatial plan. It says spatial plan should recognise and address the impacts of transport emissions on air quality and public health. I just wanted to understand the should. Is it that we hope that it will, or that we anticipate that the spatial plan framework will allow us to recognise and address the impacts? See, my eye was off the football.
So this is the future regional spatial plan
that's
to be developed. And I guess...
Oh no, it said this is policy statement 23 and it says the new regional spatial plan. So I was just wondering about the should. Is it that we anticipate it will happen, or is it that we're hoping that the spatial plan will be able to take that into account?
I guess that's very uncertain. I guess we'd like that to happen, and we're signalling that would be good to happen, but we don't know what it's going to look like yet.
We'll let you know when the bill is passed and some direction emerges. But I think probably from our perspective at the moment, it's a mix of...
And just a question for you, Chair. If I've got more stats questions, I should just take them offline, right?
You may.
Okay.
Thank
you. I love the report.
Councillor Rhodes.
Mr. Chair, a couple of little questions. Always been interested in urban dust, and I noted that you've noted that, and always thought it's a heavy contributor to sedimentation in the harbour and streams and things. So, are you able to measure that, or have you measured the urban dust component of sedimentation rates?
Yes, partially. In that question, we do have a research project that we're doing in collaboration with Earth Sciences New Zealand, and we're looking at our station where the dusts actually come from, and we can split it into this much as home heating, this much as vehicles, this much as marine aerosol, which is a sea salt. But we've also got this urban dust component, and we know it's human generated because it's low on Saturday and Sunday and it's high during the week. And that's mainly from construction activities and cars going up and down the road. And those sort of emissions do contain heavy metals when they come from cars, and that does go down the pipes and into the harbour. So it's all connected.
I've got another question too, was about, you made a note about zero emissions for home heating, and my question is there a regulatory thing in place or incentives in place at the moment operating, or is this a proposal that's kind of yet to find any legs?
Probably the latter, but and when we're talking about, there's also ultra low emission wood burners. I mean, the existing national environmental standard is quite lenient for the amount of particulate that can be emitted, but other councils have introduced their own rules saying, okay, we want wood burners that emit only a fraction of what they're allowed to emit. So ultra low emission wood burners, or there's zero emission, which is heat pumps or solar.
Thank you. Councillor Free, and I think then we'll try and wrap up this item.
And I'd like to join with everyone else saying it was a really interesting report and really nice to have some data. It was really good. Just on the data, 2/3 of the air quality impacts are transport related. Is that Does that sort of take into account the population that are exposed to the transport-related ones versus the population that's exposed to the wood-burning ones?
It's based on the total population, so
Okay.
all the health impacts.
Okay.
They narrow them down to what percentage are due to the exposure to the traffic-related air pollution and what exposure is related to the home heating.
Thank you.
And obviously, the way it's distributed across the region is going to be different. There's going to be more home heating impacts in the Wairarapa towns and more transport impacts in the urban areas.
So that's good to clear that. Just on the wood burner thing, because I actually did do my public health masters on home heating, I'd be very cautious about trying to get rid of wood burners altogether. They're very, very important for some populations. But as you alluded to, there are clean, very clean, high efficient wood burners. And I wonder if what's really needed is to make sure TAs are, applying the highest possible standards to new wood burners that are being put in. Probably that might be useful.
I agree with your comment.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you for that. And then a bit more of a question rather than a comment. I'm really interested in the Mount Vic Tunnel, people walking and cycling through that. It's a pretty awful experience. Do we monitor the air quality in that? And I'm happy to volunteer myself to wear a meter and be a little guinea pig, because I'm really concerned about school kids walking through that tunnel, which a lot of them do.
I think you're right to be concerned, especially if they dilly-dally. Tunnels are classed as indoor air quality, so they don't come within the outdoor air quality remit. But there has been studies that have been done on the Mount Vic Tunnel, and yes, the levels are quite high.
I know they're a lot better than they used to be because ventilation was improved. Okay, so can I volunteer myself to actually get some data for you? And I'd hate to do it because I hate walking through that tunnel, but for the betterment of our, public good, I would do it.
We can take that offline.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Volunteering to muck in is a fantastic way to end an item.
Well, I would have a vested interest in that. I'd be looking for some solutions.
So I'll help connect you there, Councillor. Very good. Thank you very much, officers. Completely reinforce the comments from councillors about the quality of the report, the readability, the interesting content, the knowledge gain, and not just the monitoring data, but the insights and the conclusions that were drawn from that. Very valuable, and we look forward to the workshop conversation about where we take this next for State of the Environment reporting. Appreciate your time. Thank you, committee members. Our next item is... actually, before we finish that off, Democratic Services has reminded me I was planning to do something. I would actually like to move a motion that this committee receives the report. And I've sent some wording through. So it's an information paper, so we don't need to, but I think given the work involved and the quality of the report, it is nice for this committee to formally receive the report. So that's my recommended wording. I doubt it will be too controversial. So if there's no questions on that recommendation, do I have a seconder? Councillor Free, and would anyone like to debate? So I'll move that motion, and seconded by Councillor Free, and all those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Thank you very much. There you go. That was the quickest off-the-cuff resolution to be passed without debate for a long time. And thank you, Democratic Services, for reminding me. Next item is an update on Te Awarua o Parirua Accord, the Parirua Harbour Accord, and we have Jimmy Young. Jimmy is Catchment Manager for the Parirua Harbour, if I remember rightly, and will introduce the report and take your questions. Over to you, Jimmy.
Kia ora tātou. I'll take the paper as read, but I'll just provide some brief opening commentary around it. Greater Wellington is a signatory to the Accord, along with our mana whenua partners, Ngāti Toa Rangatira, who are taking a very active role in this. They chair our steering group and have also developed the Te Waiora o Parirua framework that the action plan will be based around. And then our other partners, Porirua City, Wellington City and Wellington Water, also attend fortnightly hui through the steering group. And we have a signing signatory event on the 15th of July to sign Te Aki Wai up to the Accord, replacing Wellington Water. So the Accord is about a commitment to partnership. It's about putting the harbour at the centre of what we do as agencies. It's about doing things differently. And it's about looking at better ways to collaborate and coordinate. With that in mind, we have been working over the last 12 months to go through a process of choosing the actions that we believe are going to be the most effective and feasible within the harbour. And as a group, we've zeroed in on a bunch of those priority actions that all form the best part of the action plan, which a draft will be available at the end of this month. And for our annual plan 26-27, we've looked at ways that we can reprioritise and partner and collaborate with particularly the likes of Porora City on initiatives, and ways that we can enable Ngāti Tōrangatira to take a more active role as kaitiaki at the harbour. And I believe that's going to be a good step towards setting that direction and also informing a direction of travel for the LTP that will follow. So happy to take any questions or talk more about it this afternoon on our trip.
Thank you, Jimmy. So this is the topic of our field trip this afternoon. Could you just briefly outline what we're going to do and see this afternoon and to inform questions?
Well, we've got a lovely bus ride from here, upstate highway.
No air quality problems, I hope?
not at 80 k's probably, no. We'll talk about some of the issues as we go through the catchment. There might be some other fun activity to do on the bus. And we'll be meeting down near Kaitahi on the waterfront, on the harbour front there, meeting with Ngāti Tōrangatira, as well as we'll have representatives there from the steering committees from each of the partners as well. So we'll be talking or hearing from mana whenua about the harbour and its importance. Take a short walk out to the point, look at the mouth of the Porirua stream and finish up over at Pātaka.
Thank you. First question is Claire, Councillor Johnson.
Okay, so firstly, I just want to say last night we attended the Pāwatahanui Guardians, or Gopi, Guardians of the Pāwatahanui Inlet last night. And what was really pleasing about that was the acknowledgement of Greater Wellington Regional Council many, many times, and Jimmy and his team in particular. And when I say many times, it was everyone that spoke acknowledged them in the work, and it was really fantastic to hear that. The issues they were bringing up that I think we need to consider, and I know I'm not asking a question, but I think as we're going through this today, is how we can ensure under amalgamation that this really valuable work keeps on going, that it's acknowledged by whoever becomes the future, and that the pace isn't lost. So, and also just the LTP, the place that it'll play in the future, and making sure it's acknowledged. So it's more of a comment and an acknowledgement of Jimmy in particular, and how the community feels about our work and the work that he and his team are doing. So, but yeah, just keep in mind when you meet people, they want to know that our work will be able to be continued. That was a big worry for them.
Comments appreciated, and I won't ask Jimmy to talk to reorganisation and amalgamation. That might be a little bit tricky. But could you give us a steer in terms of how the work on the Porirua Harbour Accord is leading towards our deliberations over our long-term plan? How will those things come together?
Yeah, well, certainly the actions that we've prioritised through the Accord and with the group are being built into our annual plan for 26-27. And have been involved in environment groups discussions around LTP and service priorities, and subcatchments. So it's all feeding in there. And I would say as well that the Accord has certainly given us a leg up in terms of those partnerships with the other TAs, Porora City and Wellington City, in terms of being able to look at ways through that to collaborate and do programs collectively. So
Thank you.
That's happening.
Thank you. Nigel, would you like to comment on?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Look, in terms of your first comment, Councillor Johnson, look, I think things like the Accords will only help when we have a conversation around amalgamation or reform. There's already a lot of
conversation around catchment delivery and actually how we focus the conversation around catchment outcomes. And when you have an accord that's got multiple parties, including mana whenua, such as the one that Jimmy's talking about, that will be hugely useful, I think, in forming a really constructive conversation around how you might look at catchments differently if there is a reform, and how the work that's been done to date and the partnership to date actually seamlessly moves into that delivery. So only a positive thing to have something like this, and it will definitely help it is helping, and it will help to make sure that those outcomes are actually put deliberately into any change process. So, yeah, coupling.
Thank you. A question from me is Greater Wellington has some land holdings and land management and activity responsibilities within the Porirua Harbour catchment. I'm thinking regional parks, I'm thinking Porirua stream flood protection, I'm not quite sure what else. How do our own activities feed into our thinking about actioning the Harbour Accord? What are we doing to reduce the impacts on the harbour from our own activities and considering for reducing those over time?
Yeah, we certainly do have significant portions, not the majority, but significant portions of Belmont Regional Park. So obviously the retirement of grazing has been prioritised in that Porirua catchment through the initial work that's been done to rejig the grazing licence. So that's an important step in terms of our own abilities and mitigating sediment from our own land. We have a very active land management program through our restoration advisors that works with landowners, and that we've had some success in partnering and boosting that program with Porirua City, combining it with their riparian program, and so that's planned to continue next year. And in terms of forestry, so we do have non-regulatory programs run through the Restoration Advisory Service as well, looking to push foresters to best practice, and we're looking at new initiatives where we can potentially incentivise some of that in 26, 27 to get better outcomes. So yeah, particularly with forestry, I mean 13% of that catchment is plantation forest, and we all know the NES doesn't quite provide the safeguards that we need for that industry. So yeah, anything we can do through those programs, that non-regulatory stuff is really important.
And some of that plantation forest is Greater Wellington.
Yes, that's right. Some of that's in the cutting right. Yeah, that's right. The stuff
so
behind
does that
Battle
give
Hill.
us an extra sense of responsibility in relation to arresting sediment from forestry?
Yes, certainly. I mean, that forestry that takes place in our own land is probably the most scrutinised by our EREG team of any of the stuff that we do in the region, because we are a forward-facing agency.
I think it's scrutinised by the region too because of the proximity to Transmission Gully. Everyone
You
sees
can see
as they drive past. Very good, thank you. Councillor Rhodes and then Councillor Saw.
Mr. Chair. Jimmy, quite a lot of grumbling about Kiwi Rail last night at the Govi meeting. I was just wondering what are the issues that the Harbour Accord faces in relation to Kiwi Rail, and is that something rather that can be elevated upwards or something rather to get a bit more traction with the problems that you face and what affects?
Yeah, there were a few questions around some of those government departments. I mean, obviously the harbour's, significantly impacted by all that historical infrastructure around rail and roading, so NZTA and Kiwi Rail. Both those agencies were part of the workshops we did. They're not signatories to the Accord, but they're work in progress, I would say, in terms of the relationships and trying to get better outcomes for the work they're doing. And perhaps some of the early wins we can get is just around trying to get more wins when they're doing planned maintenance work and getting them to think more about the environmental stuff, either through a consenting process or just through leveraging those Accord relationships. Yeah.
Councillor Saw.
Cool. Thank you for this report, Jimmy. I guess these things take time when you have so many partners and moving parts involved and everything else that's going on. When you adopt the action plan and that you've said that Greater Wellington has been quite sort of targeted and tactical about which parts they do, will we see this sort of report evolve towards more activities and actions such as the one Councillor Duffy was explaining of how our interactions impact on that catchment? Do you see what I mean? Because I guess this report is very much background of how we came to the Accord and all the high level stuff that some councillors might be more familiar with than others. And I think would speak for all of us, where we'd like to see where the rubber's hitting the road and like where the activities are going to be, where the actions are, how we're performing against them, how our existing work may have to evolve, or how our existing work actually achieves some of those outcomes. What might we see in future updates of this kind?
Yeah, no, you're right in that it is just talking about the process to this point, which has taken longer than I thought, and that's what working in partnership looks like, unfortunately. Yeah, I think there have been bits of it. It's not to say we're starting from scratch, and we have been doing some good stuff already this year and making changes and sort of setting ourselves up for that 26-27 work plan. So yeah, I think you'll see, like you do through the Raupu activity report, bits of it come through there. But certainly we can do sort of 6 monthly updates or something on how that catchment plan is being implemented and exactly what role we're playing in actually doing stuff on the ground.
Yeah, because I guess it's paragraphs 41 to 43 where we talk about the financial implications, where that's also talking about our deliveries and outcomes. So if there was any steer or any sort of flavour I would like, it would be to collate it in that kind of zone.
Okay, yep. Thank you.
Thank you. So just last question from me. So an action plan is being drafted due quite soon. Will that come back to, how will that be presented to councillors?
Well, that's a good question. We do have it being presented, the draft, to the CE's governance forum in July as a date, and after that we can arrange a date for it to come to council. Yes,
Nigel.
Yeah, thanks. Look, as Jimmy mentioned, we have a really regular meeting amongst CEs with Helmut from Ngāti Toa and other representatives. Jimmy and the team take turns presenting to us. But I can't see any reason why we can't do exactly what Jimmy talked about. Once that has been approved, we bring it back as a part of a formal follow-up for one of your meetings, Chair, and that's a feature of the agenda, either as an item, if you want a particular item, or as just part of the regular work program update that the group presents to you.
Thank you very much. Very good. That's a for information paper. Appreciate your time, Jimmy, and looking forward to this afternoon. Moving on to our next agenda item, which is refreshing the Greater Wellington Climate Change Strategy, item 8. This is a decision paper. Welcome Jake and Angela to speak to us about it. Over to you first, and then just flagging that I will have a suggestion to add to the recommendation when we get to the time. So, but you introduce it first, please, and explain the why and the what that you have come up with. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just briefly introduce Angela Sutherland. This is her first council meeting with Greater Wellington. She is our Senior Advisor for Climate Change Adaptation, and we enticed her over here from Porirua City Council. So she's very familiar with local government, but I'll hand over to her.
Kia ora. Thanks, Jake. So just a few things to highlight from the paper. The refreshed wording of the climate change strategy is really about refining and consolidating what's in the current 2015 strategy that was consulted on. So it takes out any time-bound content. The intent is that it doesn't need to be revisited each time there's a change in context, so it's much more enduring than the current version. We haven't proposed any new activities through this version. There are no new costs associated with it. There's no change to the vision. There's minor tweaks to the wording of the objectives, but essentially no change to the overall intent of the strategy. It's really designed to be a foundational tool for the organisation's climate response, so it connects to the long-term plan, to our commitments through the regional policy statement and to various delivery programs from across council, which is particularly important as we head into the next LTP cycle. So the detail sitting under the plan will be coming back to the Environment and Climate Committee in August, and that will be about really identifying the very high priority, high impact actions that will need sustained leadership and focus from council.
Thank you very much. So just to reinforce that, this is the overarching strategy, and there will be further paper in August, councillors, for the action plans and bringing them up to date as well. So questions first, Councillor Connolly.
Thank you for this report. Can I just clarify under 12 A, B, C, D and E, you've kind of got a really simple summary of what the key changes are. And I guess I'm trying to get a handle on what the consequence of those changes are. And I take it B is we're removing national policy settings because they're changing and we can, to allow us to be more agile. But I guess I'm just, with A in particular, like, why would we move away from climate projections? Is that because I don't know, what's the consequence of doing that? Are we admitting that we're never going to stop, X number of degrees of warming, and we're moving away from that approach, or is that defeatist, or are there other reasons why we're doing it?
Through the chair, just to clarify, we're removing them from the document itself because we can see that they have shifted in the last 10 years. We know that there will be future reports coming out of the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, that will shift the projections again. So our work will consider climate projections and scenarios and the changing nature of those over time, but the document itself is not going to make mention of specific projections in terms of temperature increases or projected sea level rise. So it's more about the information in the document as opposed to the way that we might consider those projections and scenarios.
Isn't it good to be reminded of the consequence of those, like what those projections are telling us, i.e. that our crops won't grow and we'll all be underwater? And by removing that, are we making it seem less traumatic and less immediate?
Through the chair, that information does sit in other documents. So I think that was really the main intent of this, was to be very high level and provide the strategic direction, and that some of that detail would sit in other documents. For example, we have a regional climate change impact assessment that has used climate projection scenarios and timeframes to understand what the biggest risks are to the region. So the feeling was that if we keep it very high level and then the detail sits in other documents, we won't need to keep revisiting our strategy and our commitment to responding to climate change in that particular document.
Yeah, I'll just quickly, through you, Chair, just quickly add, it is really about keeping things fresh, essentially, and because the climate change strategy was consulted on in 2015 publicly. There was a full public consultation, and if we change it, obviously we need to come back here, whereas projections and things like that, if they're in a supplementary document, that there's less process around that sort of thing.
Just building on that, perhaps there's a distinction between projections, scenarios, forecasts in general, which we will consider because they are part of climate change planning, versus the specifics of an RCP, something, and a particular number or millimetres. Or would it be possible, especially in the Objective 2 around adaptation, to add under the Greater Wellington's role will sort of list that to consider the latest or the most up-to-date scenarios, projections, and so on as just sort of part of the process? And so it's not that we've removed the idea of projections from the strategy, but that we're just removing the specifics because the numbers change over time.
Yes, great point. Can do that.
That could be a minor amendment because it's not changing meaning.
Thank you.
Councillor Makarini, do you have a question? You just popped on screen. That's all right. Very good. You put your video on. Nice to see your face. Councillor Rhodes.
Maybe I don't think it's a silly question, but in item 10, 11, you sort of mentioned the second line, that as it no longer reflects the current context. So what do you think the current context is, and what's changed in the last 10 years?
Is this paragraph 10?
The current strategy no longer reflects the current context. It's really about the fact that we have a new regional. There was a lot of detail in the current strategy, like the current regional emissions profile. It referenced legislation that's now been superseded. So we now have things like the National Adaptation Plan, changes to the Climate Change Response Act. We've got a National Emissions Reduction Plan. We have the Climate Change Commission. So there's a whole range of contextual information that was in the more detailed current strategy that we felt if we just remove reference to those things and that information sits elsewhere in more detailed documents, then that strategy will be enduring over time.
Councillor Elder. Yes.
Given that RCP 8.5 has recently been dismissed as implausible, and that the climate catastrophe forecasts for the last 25 years have failed to materialise, will this refresh take a more pragmatic approach?
You'll see in the principles for the strategy that it's about taking a risk-based approach. And so some of that detail in terms of the scenarios that we might align our work with will be documented elsewhere in more detailed action plans. But we're proposing taking a more principles-based approach that you'll see from the principles that we're talking about, responding now while acting for the long term, considering the most plausible climate scenarios, knowing that some of the future is uncertain. Those are projections, not certainties. And so we need to balance our decision making and be pragmatic, but also consider the range of projections.
Thank you. Question from me. Are we expecting further policy development from central government around climate change? Any law, national policy direction around natural hazards, climate? What are we expecting soon in the foreseeable future that might have a bearing on the strategy?
Well, the way the strategy has been written is in such a way that it won't need to be adapted depending on what central government comes down with. But one thing we are expecting this side of the election is changes to the Climate Change Response Act, which will mandate adaptation planning in priority locations, and that will be they'll be identified through regional spatial planning as part of the planning bill. So that's really the main change that we're expecting over the coming year.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any further questions. I have one, and it leads into my suggested recommendation. So one of the key areas that strikes me for, thank you, Councillor Elder, for working strategically on climate and action plans as well is around partnership with mana whenua. And I noted recently that the new, well, not so new, but the iwi Environmental Management Plan for Rangitane, which we accepted or recognised at a meeting or two back, has sections on climate change with their policies and objectives around climate change. And it strikes me that part of our climate change strategy should really be recognising the policies and objectives of our mana whenua partners and working in partnership to pursue, because they'll generally be the same sorts of policies and objectives that we might have. So would it be, while we're trying to raise up and simplify this strategy, would it be a onerous imposition on your perfectly crafted document if there was a fourth objective added that recognised mana whenua objectives and policies around climate change?
Yeah, that would be, we could certainly add that in if the committee decides that they would like to add a fourth objective.
Would that have any implications or risks or problems for you?
I think it would probably just reinforce what we are already doing. So we're very much partnering with mana whenua, particularly around the climate-related projects of the Wellington Regional Leadership Committee. So I just see that as reinforcing a position that we do already take.
Great. That was what I was thinking too. So committee members, I'd like to promote, this is a decision paper, so we do need to approve or recommend that this policy go to council. And so I've added in a second suggested variation that would add a fourth objective around recognising mana whenua objectives and policies on climate change and partnering, which we already do, but it builds that and integrates it in with our climate change strategy. There would obviously need to be a bit of work on the descriptive text that would sit underneath this objective. So hence the suggestion that officers draft that up in consultation with myself and Chair Makarini from the Te Tiriti Committee, and we can share that with you before it comes to council and make sure there's comfort on that. So I'm going to move that. If I could find a second to support me, Councillor Saw. Would anyone like to ask any questions about the amended recommendation? Okay, so would anyone like to? Would you like to speak, Councillor Saw?
Yes, I would. I think I can see both sides where our work around climate has evolved over the last 2 terms, and it's not lost on me that our previous colleagues did declare a climate emergency, and there will be parts of our community that would see this evolution of this work as somehow stepping back from that, but others may also see it as a way of embedding it and making it BAU, and being realistic about what we can deliver. So in speaking to these recommendations, I just want to hold those 2 things front of our mind, that we do want to carry on the work of our previous councils, and also that our and in making a declaration like that, we have to sort of position ourselves in being trustworthy and declaring something like that and continuing with this work. That is all.
Thank you.
And I support these recommendations.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Councillor Fresh.
Yeah, I'm happy to support your new recommendation along with the original one. I just very quickly want to say that I welcome the focus, or an increased focus on adaptation. I think that what we do need is to be really realistic about the fact that people are facing threats right now. And I don't think that the report as it's framed takes away any urgency from the other aspect of trying to still mitigate. But we do actually have to try and lead our communities somehow to deal with what's happening. And I really welcome what I think is a more explicit emphasis on the adaptation side of things. And I like the way that it's, it has aspects of science and what the Regional Council can do, but also what we can help communities do.
Thank you. Any other speakers? So we have those 2 recommendations moved and seconded, and we've debated that. So we will, all those in favour say aye. Aye. And against?
Aye.
I think that was a delayed aye rather than a against. So just clarifying, was there a vote against? No. Thank you very much. Does that complete the decision-making process? I'm not very good at the formals. Excellent. So we're now on to our last paper, and going okay for time. So the last paper is the Te Rōpū Taiao Environment Group Activity Report, which Fatima, our Acting General Manager, will introduce. And then no doubt there'll be questions, because there's always lots of interesting things in these reports.
Kia ora koutou. We'll take the paper as read. I think the chair had request for a highlights, but you can see we've done a significant amount of work even within our 6 weeks. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Conley.
So my question is around flood resilience and a request for some more information to come back to a future meeting. So there's quite a lot of mention of flood outcomes and various projects that are happening in the flooding space. But at no point in the report was poor Stokes Valley mentioned. And in the April floods, Stokes Valley had more people evacuated than anywhere else in Wellington. And so it concerns me that Stokes Valley hasn't been elevated to the level of this report, and that we've got other projects happening in Wainuiomata and Waifatu and various other places around the region, and Stokes Valley hasn't been elevated to that. Now, I am aware that Stokes Valley issues were probably more a TA responsibility than us, but obviously with flooding, it's a mixed melee of the TA, Wellington Water, and us that produces, and planning rules that produce the outcomes that we've seen. So I'm really keen for and now we don't have the Hutt Valley Flood Subcommittee, I'm really keen to get some future information on what happened in Stokes Valley and what the contributing factors were, and whether we need to look at our settings in that regard.
Thank you. I think David's got some thoughts.
Yeah, via the chair. I think if we look at the purpose of this report, which is activity reporting, Ros, taking your feedback on, is that something we can park for the environmental reports? Because that might come out more in the next session around a deeper dive onto what we're doing in the different regions around flood resilience in the same way we did for air quality. That might be a more appropriate vehicle. I think we could potentially cover some of that or explore that a bit more in depth at the next session.
So I don't think that's timely enough from my point of view. So yes, it will come into that conversation, but that could be a year or so away. And for the residents of Stokes Valley that Councillor Connolly is referring to, I think there's a more of a prescient thing. Let's take it as an action item, and we'll do a bit of thinking about what we do, and maybe we can share some information offline with councillors as well as potentially.
And also just conscious of the fact that having got rid of the Hutt Valley Flood Subcommittee, they're now this is the forum to raise those flooding issues, and maybe we need to adapt so that issues aren't dropped.
Yes. Jack, would you like to comment?
I was just going to sort of try to clarify up the request so we can commission it. So what, if I'm understanding you correctly, Councillor Connolly, you would like some information about what we know of the extent of flooding, what work we did, and then different roles and responsibilities as an information item?
Yes, well, I guess if there were actions arising from that, that would be fine. But and I guess looking holistically at flooding, potentially things we could be doing either in a planning sense or any planting or any general flood management things that we should be looking at for Stokes Valley, given the fact that they've had flooding issues.
I can just speak now to where our responsibilities currently reach, but for councillors who aren't aware, there's a midpoint in the catchment where there's a particular culvert. Downstream of that, our responsibilities around maintaining the channel clear. Upstream of that is a stormwater responsibility, which will pass to Te Aki Wai, and then through the climate resilience infrastructure funding that we were co-funded by the Crown, we also undertook work on the entrance of Stokes Valley Stream into the Hutt River to essentially allow for more effective passage at not backing up. But what happened in that event was same as in Wellington, a massive stormwater event that overwhelmed the surface water, and you did nonetheless have floodwater backing up. But we can take that, Councillor Connolly, and I'll commission that.
I guess also I'm very, very aware of our current financial situation and not wanting to add more jobs or workload onto the council plate. But at the same time, if we need to relook at where those flood boundaries sit for our smaller streams, then I want us to at least be cognizant of the fact that this is an issue. I'm not sure whether it was in this case, but that's kind of the sort of thing I want to explore. And also for some of those streams in Wellington or Whittle Bay, for example, should we be doing more to socialise flooding risks, even if it's not currently part of our flood management responsibilities? But today's focus just on Stokes Valley. I can leave the others to.
Thank you. So let's work a little bit offline to refine that, to make sure officers have got a clear steer on what we're looking for. Councillor Free?
Just looking at my point, and seeing that we've obviously got a regulatory role there with at the moment Wellington Water, and communication with WCC. How is that going to work? How does that regulatory role envisaged to work? Because this is a live case, isn't it? As we do the transition to Te Aki Wai.
And I'll just add my question to that, so it can be answered together. Aware that there's 2 investigations around Mile Point. One is the Crown investigation, and one is our sort of RMA-based one. The Crown one, there's something coming out soon. How does that relate to our one, and what will Greater Wellington's stance or statement be?
I'll ask Sean to respond to those questions.
So there were a couple of questions I heard there. There was one about the Crown Review team and our investigation, so they're quite separate. But we're of the understanding the Crown Review team are going to come up with an interim report within the next month. That won't be publicly released for about a month after that, we believe. That's what we believe at the moment. That's the information we have. We have asked to have a copy of that interim report just to make sure that it doesn't interfere with some of our investigation. So we just, from an investigation point of view, so our investigation is quite different. So that's under the RMA, and that's tracking along as we stand. So it's under investigation. I can't comment too much in this forum, but what we could do in, say, a couple of months' time, we could probably do a behind closed door workshop if councillors wanted that, and we could give a little bit more information around the ongoing investigation and where we're at with it, if that would be helpful.
Thank you. It would need to be a briefing, you informing us, because we can't have any influence on that investigation.
Yeah, that's right. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. And then Councillor Freeze, part of the question.
My question was really around the situation that we're moving into with Te Aki Wai, and who will actually, if going forwards there's a breach of resource consent or whatever, who will we be issuing abatement notices to? I mean, what will be the landscape for regulatory monitoring and enforcement when things change?
Yeah, so we're looking into that at the moment. It's quite complex legally in terms of responsibility and culpability, but it's something our legal team are looking into in terms of the responsibility Te Aki Wai will take on when they come into play. I can't really comment too much about that. It's an ongoing sort of conversation, but it looks like they will take on that responsibility is what we're seeing at the moment. But it's ongoing at the moment, and our legal team are looking at that.
So when would we expect to have some clarity as governors over what the new way of working?
Yeah, but so we'll it's around an RMA responsibility and who takes that responsibility on. That's what we're looking at the moment.
Doesn't the responsibility sit with the consent holder, and that doesn't really change? I mean, someone might inherit the consent, but someone still is the consent holder.
Well, that's probably what I'm trying not to be confused.
Confusion as to, I think you're talking, Sean, about responsibility for the Moa Point incident that's already occurred moving forward. I think Sarah's asking about future responsibilities for consents and breaches of those consents, which, as Quentin has said, Te Aki Wai will take responsibility for, and so I'll hand over.
It's quite complex, but yeah. So one of the things around the consents themselves will be transferred to the new entity, so they will take on responsibility for the consents. So they some of the city councils might hold on to the consents as well. So it'll be a complex situation of some of the consents will be held by the TAs, some will be held by Te Aki Wai, and they're going through a process at the moment of finding which ones they're going to transfer where. So they will be transferred to a legal entity. That's probably all I can say at this stage. But some will sit with the TA, some will sit with Te Aki Wai.
Okay.
Thank you. And for clarity, Greater Wellington's consents for bulk water activities will likewise transfer to Te Aki Wai. They will then be the consent holder legally for those.
That's correct. Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions on the activity report, councillors? Councillor, just for visibility, I raised with staff the question of whether we should submit as an organisation on the Conservation Reform Bill, which is currently before Parliament, which primarily affects public conservation land, but it does have some overlap with reserves that might be part of regional parks, and regional councils may or may not have a role in the planning for that. Advice is that we've got other priorities, and I've decided not to advocate further that we should, but if anyone had particular interest in that, just for transparency, I can share that advice with you, and you can tell me whether I'm being too soft or what you like, but I'm just going to leave it there unless you wish to find out more. No other questions have emerged, and that's the last item on the agenda, and we don't need to do any promotions or anything because it's an information report. It's always sad to finish a good meeting, isn't it? But that's been wonderful. Thank you very much for your succinct questions, and to our yes, everyone's popping on. Very good. Thank you for succinct questions, officers, for your sterling work and answers to our public participants. We now have a workshop. We'll just take a couple of minutes comfort break and then go into the workshop before we then go on our field trip. So to conclude with our closing karakia. Kia tau te rangimārie, ki ronga, ki raro, ki roto, ki waho. Ao ki te aorangi, ka whakamaua ki a tīna, huie, tai ki e. Thank you. So just a couple of minutes break literally and then back for the workshop.